Spider-Man is one of the most iconic characters ever. Forget superheroes, Peter Parker as a character transcends generations. I mean, he's my son's favorite character, and he's 3. He has had many iterations on the silver screen, but the MCU and the universe seems to be expanding more and more, and now that we're heading into the multiverse, it seems like we're gonna get even more Spider-Man and Spider-Women for that matter. So today, I'm gonna tackle every version of the popular character. Well, not every single version, because I'd be here for years. A lot of the Spider-Men are just clones or just have a different color hair, so some are not really worth doing. So rather than every single Spider-Man, let's focus on the popular ones and the ones that you requested. And just for me, I wanted to do the ones from Into the Spider-Verse as well. But still, here are the spiders who deserve to be brought to live action. But before we get started today, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Skillshare. Now, I get some comments from time to time about transforming photos from actors to characters and how I do it. I use Photoshop, which has a little bit of a learning curve, but if you want to get started learning it, Skillshare has you covered. I really like Alan Ayubi's mega Photoshop videos where he brings you from beginner to expert and does a lot more than just photoshopping people's faces onto characters. Or if you're interested in starting a YouTube channel for yourself, check out Sorella Moore on YouTube Success and building an authentic channel that's worth the follow. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there's no ads, they're always launching new premium courses, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. Skillshare has you covered from video, illustration, music, web development, just to name a few. They have it all there. The first 1,000 subscribers of mine to click the link in the description below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so you can start exploring, learning, and creating today. So check out that description below for more details. As for the castings today, we're going to be tackling quite a few. Classic Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Peter B. Parker, Spider-Woman, Silk, Spider-Gwen, Spider-Ham, Spider-Man 2099, Spiderman Noir, and Spider-Punk. Quick side note, although I'm casting all of these characters in pretty much what they are like in the comics, certain characters are in the same timeline as Peter Parker. I'm treating this differently. I'm approaching this as if they are popping in the multiverse, and essentially could be working within the MCU. First up, we have to tackle classic Peter Parker. Original recipe, if you will. The one that is in high school struggling with everyday issues while juggling being a superhero. Now, it's worth noting that we've already seen this done 3 times in live action, but I would be remiss if I didn't give my own version of this and who I'd like to see don it. Now, I actually really enjoy each version of the live action characters, but for different reasons. But if I'm being honest, Tom Holland comes out on top. I would actually go very similar to what they did. Someone who's actually high school age, someone who can play the awkward and the nerdy, but also can pull off Spider-Man. That's why I went with one of the best young actors working today, and someone I guarantee has a very bright future ahead of him. My Spider-Man is Noah Jupe. He's been impressing me since I first saw him in Wonder when he was like 12 years old. But it's in Honey where he plays a young Shia LaBeouf where he really shines.
In here, Jack!
He's exactly 16 now, but I think his acting is top notch. He pulls off the awkward so well, and he really shows that unsure nature without it seeming like acting.
I'm Otis. I'll live over there in Moon 6. Shy girl.
He's really stood out in a lot of movies recently, but he really hasn't had that iconic role. He's got the physique and the look that I want for this role, and I just think his acting at this age is unrivaled. So Noah Jupe as Spider-Man. Next up, let's tackle Miles Morales. Now, this one has been fan-cast to death. And while I do agree people like Caleb McLaughlin, or even my preferred pick, Miles Brown, would work incredibly well here, I'm sure if you've been on the internet, you've seen those names done over and over again. So let's look elsewhere, because it's really easy just to say Miles Brown would be perfect. If we're not going to go with one of those 2 picks, let's look at someone who's actually closer to the age that he is in the comics when he first starts out. And if him and the original version of Spider-Man are going to mix it up, I want someone who's a little bit younger than Noah, who's 16. But I still want that personality, that physicality, and someone who can grow with this role. That's why I end up going with Isaiah Russell Bailey, who actually featured in a previous fan cast, but after a comment said he'd be perfect for Miles, I just can't stop seeing it. He's got the perfect build, is very talented in parkour and martial arts, and has a perfect personality for this as well.
That's nothing compared to the price that I have to pay.
What are you talking about?
I'm top of the food chain at school. Being stuck in a program with a bunch of nerds could ruin my rep.
I also like that he's an unknown choice. And at 14, he'd be perfect age for exactly what I want here. So Isaiah Russell Bailey as Miles Morales. Next up, we have Peter B. Parker. Now, there's very little chance we'll see him appear in live action since Into the Spider-Verse featured him so prominently. But still, he was one of my favorite characters within that movie, so I really want to tackle a fan cast of him. Now, I do actually really like the person who voiced him, who is Jake Johnson. I think he'd work incredibly well in live action, but that kind of defeats the purpose of recasting, so let's look elsewhere. Now, I want someone who feels like they've been put through the ringer, and someone who's a little bit despondent to the role of Spider-Man. They should be a little bit more apathetic, but have that little bit of an edge to them. Now, there are two choices here that I think would work incredibly well. First, Andy Samberg, who definitely has the cadence for a role like this, which he showed perfectly in Palm Springs.
And everything that's remaining is the future, encased in chocolate. I have no interest in this.
But I think I'd have a tough time just not seeing Andy Samberg. And honestly, he might just be a touch too silly. That's why I give the slight edge to Glenn Howerton, who has that perfect level of angry and disdain for this.
Hey, everybody, begin to shut up. Last night, my ex turned me down for sex. So I got angry, I got very drunk, went pee-pee on the hospital where she works, and I went to jail.
Now, I think he has silliness, but less silliness than Andy. But I definitely think he has that look to play that little bit of aged Spider-Man, and if he puts on some weight, I think he'd be wonderful here. He's definitely an atypical choice that's a little bit outside the box, but God, do I think he would work. So Glenn Howerton as Peter B. Parker. Next up, let's tackle Spider-Woman. Now, I've never really been a massive fan of this character, and I've never really followed her journey, but I think she could have a really interesting role within Spider-Verse. I think she could provide guidance and really be a mentor to our main Spider-Man, whoever that may be. I think she needs to be really skilled and really confident. She needs to be experienced in hand-to-hand combat and be a skilled spy and an acrobat. For me, that pointed towards Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who at 36, I think is the right age for this, and has shown she can be a real badass. She meets the physical demands of this role and just has that persona.
I really like how you were able to kick so high in those tight pants.
Now, she did play Huntress in Birds of Prey, but honestly, I don't think she really stood out there, and they really didn't give her a lot to work with. That's why I think she deserves a second chance, and I think Spider-Woman would be a perfect fit. So Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Spider-Woman. Next, let's do a weird one, Spider-Punk, one that hasn't been brought to the screen before. Now, this isn't an alternative version of Peter Parker, rather he is Hobart Brown, who is a completely different type of Spider-Man. As the name would imply with Spider-Punk, he's rebellious and really against the corporations and the man. He's known for being foul-mouthed and obviously willing to speak his mind. He is the leader of the Spider Army and definitely needs to be a different kind of Spider-Man. Now, I actually want to go with one of the few actors who can pull this off. I want someone in their late 20s who gives that rebellious vibes, but also gives off the impression that they've been doing this for a while. I went with Lakeith Stanfield, who doesn't really look anything like the character, but I honestly think he's one of the few actors who can really pull this off without it being cringy. It would require a slight change of character to make him fit, but I think he's an incredibly underrated actor who always surprises me. And I can really see him pulling off that punk look and really almost updating it, and I can see him definitely being a voice of an activist.
Always close to destruction. Life itself is but a series of close calls. I mean, how would you know you were alive unless you knew you could die?
So Lakeith Stanfield as Spider-Punk. Now, if we're going down the rabbit hole of weird characters, let's tackle Spider-Ham. A fan favorite, and although one who needs to be animated, we still need a voice that's in line with this character. Let's be honest, John Mulaney is just Spider-Ham, and I can't picture another voice here. But if I had to, and I had to consider someone else, I would go with Ben Schwartz, who can definitely bring something that's a little bit different, yet funny. I don't love the choice because he's recently been Sonic, but I also think his voice would work really well here as well.
Why? Because you shot me.
I know.
You shot me!
All right, I heard you the first time.
So, Ben Schwartz as Spider-Ham. Next, let's tackle Noir. Again, like Mulaney, Nick Cage brought something wonderful here. His voice just comes out when I see the animated version of this character. But still, in live action, I think we can do better than Nick Cage. I know, criminal, but hear me out, because I think Keanu Reeves would kill this character. He can play the dark and the muted, he has the look, and feels like the right age for this kind of character.
Heaven and hell are right here. Behind every wall, every window. The world behind the world.
We're smack in the middle.
He definitely has the physicality as well, and I think his type of humor just fits in well with this. So Keanu Reeves as Spiderman Noir. Next up, let's tackle Spider-Man 2099. The Spider-Man teased at the end of Into the Spider-Verse. And much like Into the Spider-Verse, and like I keep saying over and over again, Oscar Isaac, the person who voiced him, would be great here. But he's gonna be Moon Knight eventually, so let's look elsewhere. Now, Spider-Man 2099, who's Miguel O'Hara, is a little bit smug. I want him to feel lived in and confident in himself, much more than any other Spider-Man here. I want someone who looks at least 30 and someone who can lead, but also has that dry sarcasm. I want Diego Boneta, who is 30, but has the look and the presence for this. He feels a little bit otherworldly, which 2099 should feel like, and he also feels like he wouldn't shy down from anyone and have that calm presence under pressure.
Am I breaking yours, Mr. Daimler?
What?
Your heart. Am I breaking it?
No, you're not. My patience, however, is at its breaking point. Take a seat.
I also like he's not a massive star as well, which also would help me buy into this character. So Diego Boneta as Spider-Man 2099. Next up, let's tackle Silk, one of the only characters on this list who's actually been cast in the MCU, although most likely just in name. Now Silk, or Cindy Moon, is different than she's seen in the MCU. In the comics, she actually spent about 10 years in isolation, which prompts her to have a tough time in social situations, and sometimes she has anxiety, which would make this a very interesting role to explore and expand on. I want that to be an aspect of her character, but obviously not the whole thing. I think it would be interesting to have her character grow. I end up going with Vanda McGrath, who was the standout in Ip Man 4. Now, she shows a great deal of innocence, but also anxiety in that role. But she still somehow communicates confidence and absolutely destroyed the physical demands of that role. She looks and feels like this character should be, and I feel like as she grows, she could bring even more confidence and really turn into something special here. I also like that Vanda is actually 18, and I think it would be really great to see her at the beginning of her journey in this character. So Vanda McGrath as Silk. Lastly, we have Spider-Gwen. Either than Miles Morales, probably towards the top of the list of what most fans want to see in live action. Now with Spider-Gwen, we need someone on the younger side, but a little bit older than Peter or Miles in my opinion. She needs to have that air of confidence and be sure-footed, but she can definitely have that softer side and get a little bit emotional and definitely provide guidance. She's definitely a badass as well though, don't get me wrong. Now, much like Miles Morales, there have been a ton of fan casting out there, but I want to go with, again, a different pick. Because after seeing Emily Alyn Lind on screen, I can't help seeing her as Gwen. She just has that impression of the character for me, and she has that confidence in spades. I think she would follow this character well and have that tough exterior. She can also lean into the softness and the gentleness when we need it.
Just because she's a psychopath doesn't mean women are evil.
But at 19, I think she would be just that little bit of senior to the rest of our young Spider-Man, but also fitting really well with the character. So Emily Alyn Lind as Spider-Gwen. So there is the majority of Spider-Man we might see in the multiverse. Let me know who I missed in the comments below, as well as let me know who you cast in these roles. I always enjoy reading your choices. Next up, we are going to go through the foes of Spider-Man, but I'm also going to build more of a storyline and tackle it as the main universe rather than just the multiverse in general. But let me know your comments. Where should I go with this? As always, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.